to show us the bigger picture of homelessness in Maricopa County, and experts are pointing out a possible new trend that could lead to more people living on the streets.
Heat, heat, heat up here. In Phoenix, heat is not a background detail. It is the main character. It decides how far you can walk. It decides how long you can wait in line. It decides whether your body recovers overnight or stays trapped in exhaustion. Now imagine facing that heat without a stable place to sleep. No room, no reliable air conditioning, no safe place to cool down. Just pavement, parking lots, dry wind, and the constant search for shade. Phoenix is a city built for comfort. A city of bright pools, cool shopping centers, and glass buildings that hum with cold air. But outside those doors, there are people trying to survive in conditions most residents never have to test. And here's the uncomfortable truth. In a country known for innovation and resources, people are still being pushed into a life where the most basic needs are uncertain. How does a person stay healthy when water is never enough and shade is never guaranteed?
Went up slightly. So if you compare that to 2024, it went up 3%. If you compare it to 2023, it went up 1%. I think we've been discussing how it's useful to compare it to 2023 because 2024 was really an interesting year.
How do you plan for the future when your energy is spent just staying safe today? How does anyone rebuild stability when the day itself feels like a physical obstacle? Stay with this story until the end, because what Phoenix reveals is not only a crisis, it is a warning, a reminder of how thin the line can be between being okay and being outside. And as you watch, ask yourself one question that matters more than people like to admit. If one emergency hit your life this month, how much protection do you really have? Welcome to Homeless US News, because these are not background characters. These are human beings. And the way a society treats its most vulnerable people tells the truth about its values. Today, our story begins in Phoenix, Arizona, a city where survival is shaped by something many people underestimate. Not snow, not storms, not freezing nights. Heat. This documentary is told in 6 parts. Each part builds toward a fuller picture of what is happening and why it matters. At the end, we will leave you with a clear call to action that anyone can take. If you believe these stories deserve careful attention, stay with us. This is Homeless US News, and this is Phoenix.
And Smith says that if a lot of these nonprofits don't get more funding, that would mean that many of them are going to have to cut back on programs, leaving them with skeleton crews. And we're told that there's a flood of nonprofits going to the same places to get more money. And cities will also have to be working on how to backfill those lost beds. Reporting live in Phoenix, Casey Torres, Arizona's Family.
Part 1. Phoenix Today. A city that feels like IT never cools down. Phoenix is often described as a city of growth. New neighborhoods, new roads, new jobs, a place where people move to start over. But underneath the growth is a pressure that keeps rising. Housing costs, economic stress, limited options, and for people living without stable shelter, the desert climate adds a constant physical threat. In Phoenix, the heat is not only uncomfortable, it can become dangerous quickly, especially when your body is already tired, dehydrated, or living with untreated health issues. During the hottest months, it is common for temperatures to climb above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That kind of heat changes the rules of daily life. It makes walking longer distances risky. It turns a bus stop into a stressful place to wait. It makes sleeping in the day nearly impossible. And if you do not have stable shelter, you cannot fully recover. You might find shade for a few minutes, then lose it as the sun moves. You might get water, then realize you need more before the day ends. You might sit down, then get told to move. Phoenix becomes a city where you are always negotiating your right to exist in public. Some people see tents, tarps, or sleeping bags and assume the story starts there. But the truth is that the tent is often the last chapter, not the first. Many people who end up outside were housed not long ago. They were paying rent. They were working. They were managing life, even if it was stressful. Then the margin disappeared. A rent increase, a job shift, a family conflict, a health expense, a car repair, a missed paycheck, and suddenly the math stops working. Phoenix also reveals a reality many people do not understand. Homelessness does not always look like what movies show. Sometimes it looks like a person in a vehicle trying to stay unnoticed. Sometimes it looks like a family moving between motels. Sometimes it looks like a person sleeping somewhere quiet because shelters are full or feel unsafe. What makes Phoenix particularly intense is the way heat forces people into constant motion. You cannot just stay put comfortably. The sun moves, the shade disappears, your body gets weaker, your water runs out. You have to move again. And when you are always moving, stability becomes harder to build. This is not just about discomfort. It is about how a climate can magnify every other problem. So as we continue, keep one thought in mind. In Phoenix, the environment is not neutral. It adds pressure to every system already under strain. And that is why Phoenix is one of the clearest examples of how homelessness becomes a full-body experience, not just a social issue. Part 2. How the crisis changed over time. WHEN temporary becomes years. Phoenix did not become this way overnight. The crisis expanded gradually, then accelerated. Over the past decade, Phoenix has grown fast. More people moved in, more development appeared. But affordable housing did not expand at the same pace for everyone. When a city grows quickly, the people with the least protection feel it first. Not because they are weak, because they are exposed. A person with savings can survive a short emergency. A person with supportive family can survive a job loss. A person with stable credit can navigate a rough season. But if you are already close to the edge, the same events hit harder. That is how temporary hardship turns into long-term instability. Phoenix also experienced shifts that made the margin thinner for many households. Rents increased, basic costs rose. Some jobs did not keep up with those costs. And when people fall behind, it can be difficult to catch up again. A common misunderstanding is that homelessness is always the result of a dramatic event. Sometimes it is, but often it is a slow erosion of stability. A person misses rent 1 month. They borrow from someone. They pay late fees. They cut spending. They skip medical care. They stop replacing worn shoes. They reduce food quality. They carry stress daily. Then something else happens, and there is nothing left to cut. That is when people lose housing. Another thing changes when homelessness rises. The city becomes more visible with outdoor survival. Encampments become more common. People sleep closer together because isolation feels unsafe. Public spaces start to carry the weight of private life, but visibility can create conflict. People complain. Businesses worry. Residents feel fear. And cities often respond by moving people. The problem is that moving people does not remove the need. It only changes the location. Phoenix has seen this pattern repeatedly. An area becomes crowded. The city clears it. People scatter. Then new clusters form because survival is easier near resources. This movement creates instability even for people who are trying to rebuild. If you are constantly displaced, it is harder to keep appointments, harder to maintain contact with caseworkers, harder to store documents, harder to sleep well enough to function. So the crisis grows not only in numbers, but in complexity. And when complexity grows, the system becomes harder to navigate. A person might need identification to access services, but they lost their documents. They might need a phone number, but they cannot keep a phone charged. They might need transportation, but buses cost money and heat makes long rides exhausting. Each barrier looks small on paper, but in real life, barriers stack. This is how homelessness becomes long-term. Phoenix shows how a city can expand and still leave people behind. It shows how a climate can amplify every pressure. It shows how a system can work hard and still be overwhelmed. And it raises a question that every growing city must answer. When a city becomes more expensive, who is allowed to stay? Part 3. Why people fall into homelessness in Phoenix, the real root causes. To understand Phoenix, you have to understand the layers. Homelessness is not one story. It has many stories moving at the same time, but the common roots tend to include a few major forces. First, housing affordability. When rents rise faster than wages, a gap forms. That gap becomes the danger zone. For people with low income, even a small gap is not manageable. It is a countdown. Second, limited supply of affordable units. If there are not enough units people can realistically afford, the competition becomes brutal. Landlords choose applicants with stronger credit, higher income, cleaner background checks, and people already under stress get filtered out. Third, unstable income and job volatility. Many people work, but work does not always equal stability. A person can have a job and still fall behind if hours are cut. A person can have a job and still lose housing if rent jumps. A person can have a job and still lose stability if childcare changes. Phoenix has many service and hourly jobs. These jobs keep the city running. But if wages do not match living costs, the workers who support the city cannot remain housed. Fourth, health issues. Physical health problems create costs and limit work. Mental health challenges can make daily functioning harder. And when care is difficult to access, small problems become big ones. In Phoenix, heat makes health issues worse. If you live outside and you already struggle with asthma, fatigue, anxiety, or chronic pain, the heat adds another burden. Fifth, family conflict and lack of support systems. Many people do not have a safety net. Some have family, but relationships are strained. Some have friends, but those friends are also struggling. Some are alone. When someone loses housing and has nobody to fall back on, the street becomes the default. Sixth, domestic instability. Some people leave unsafe situations and choose the street as the least bad option. That is a painful reality, and it reminds us that homelessness is not always about lack of effort. Sometimes it is about choosing survival. Seventh, policies and system gaps. Even when programs exist, demand can exceed supply. Waiting lists can be long. Resources can be scattered. Rules can be difficult for people living outside. In Phoenix, the climate makes delays more serious. Waiting is not just frustrating. In extreme heat, waiting can be physically risky. This is why one unexpected bill is not just a phrase. It is a real path. A person might be stable until a medical expense hits, or until a car breaks down, or until rent increases, or until a job changes. Then the gap becomes too wide. So when people ask, why are they homeless? A better question is often, what protection did they have when life got hard? Because in Phoenix, when protection is thin, the heat is not forgiving. And here is the truth that should matter to everyone watching. Homelessness is not only a personal crisis, it is a community signal that something is out of balance. Part 4, a day outside in Phoenix, shade, water, and the endless search for relief. If you want to understand homelessness in Phoenix, imagine a day where the goal is not success. The goal is not even progress. The goal is simply to remain functional. The day often starts early, not because a person feels rested, but because sleeping in the heat becomes difficult, and because public spaces start filling with activity. Many people wake up with stiffness in their bodies, with dry mouths, with fatigue that feels heavier than it should. Then the search begins. Where can I cool down? Where can I refill water? Where can I sit without being forced to move? Where can I wash my face? Where can I use a restroom? These questions sound small until you realize something. In a housed life, these needs are automatic. In an unhoused life, they are tasks you must solve again and again. Shade becomes precious. A tree, a bridge, a building shadow, a library, a cooling center. But cooling centers have hours. Libraries have rules. Businesses have limits. And sometimes people are turned away simply because they look like they do not belong. Then there is the water problem. Water is heavy to carry. Water gets warm. Water runs out. If you are outside all day, you need consistent access. But access is not always reliable. And the heat changes how fast your body drains. You can feel fine, then suddenly feel dizzy. You can walk a short distance, then feel weak. You can stand in line, then feel your patience and strength disappear. This is not weakness. This is physiology. Another hidden burden is belongings. If you carry everything you own, you move slower, you tire faster, you become a target for theft. You cannot easily attend appointments or interviews without worrying about losing your bag. A person may have documents, medication, photos, a charger, a few clothes. That bag is their entire stability, so they protect it. That protection can create a life where trust is difficult, because when you lose what little you have, you lose your ability to rebuild. Now imagine trying to do normal tasks in this reality. Try applying for work. Try attending a meeting. Try focusing on a form. Try showing up on time. Try staying calm in a bureaucratic office, all while your body is overheating and you slept poorly. This is why homelessness is exhausting in ways people underestimate. It is not only emotional, it is logistical. And in Phoenix, logistics can become life or death decisions faster than in many other places. Despite this, you still see resilience. People share water. People trade information about resources. People warn each other about places to avoid. People create small routines just to keep sanity. And sometimes you see something powerful. A person who is almost nothing still offers kindness. A simple greeting, a small gesture, a shared moment of humor. Because human beings try to stay human, even under pressure. Phoenix shows how survival can strip life down to basics. And it shows how much strength it takes to live that way day after day. Part 5: What's being done, city and county response, and why the gap still feels huge. Phoenix has not ignored the crisis. There are agencies, programs, and coordinated networks working daily. There are shelter systems. There are outreach teams. There are rehousing efforts. There are heat relief programs. These efforts matter, but the scale of need often exceeds the resources available. And when that happens, people remain outside. One major challenge is capacity. When temperatures rise and the risk increases, more people seek indoor relief. But beds are limited, staff are limited, facilities are limited. Another challenge is access. If a person is far from a service location, transportation becomes a barrier. If a person has mobility issues, long distances become impossible. If a person lacks identification, they may get stuck in paperwork delays. Another challenge is continuity. Housing systems require consistency, but people living outside are often displaced, moved, or scattered. Keeping contact becomes difficult. Phoenix also faces public pressure. Residents want cleaner streets. Businesses want customers to feel safe. Neighborhoods want visible change. Cities often respond with enforcement or relocation, but enforcement without alternatives can backfire. If a person loses a tent or belongings, their health can worsen. If they lose documents, their path to housing becomes harder. If they scatter away from services, outreach becomes less effective. So the city is caught in a difficult balance. Public spaces need to function. People also need somewhere to exist. True solutions require housing supply, supportive services, prevention, and stabilization, not only movement. That is why the most important work often happens before homelessness begins. Eviction prevention, rental assistance, mediation, short-term support, income stabilization. These programs do not go viral online. They are not dramatic, but they can prevent collapse. Phoenix also needs more long-term affordable housing, because without housing stock, the system becomes a revolving door. A person gets helped, but another person falls into crisis, and the street stays crowded. This is what makes the problem feel endless. But there is still progress worth noticing. When a person moves from the street into stable housing, it matters. When someone receives care and avoids a medical crisis, it matters. When a person reconnects with family, it matters. When a person gets a job and can keep it, it matters. These changes are real, even when the overall need remains large. And Phoenix proves a key point. You can have good programs and still need more capacity. So if you ever wonder why the crisis persists, consider this. If the flow of people falling into homelessness is larger than the flow of people being rehoused, the street population remains. That is not a moral failure. It is a math problem. and math problems require structural solutions. Part 6. The people who show up, nonprofits, neighbors, and the sparks of hope. In Phoenix, some of the most consistent support comes from nonprofits, volunteers, and community networks. These groups are often the bridge between crisis and stabilization. They provide basics like water, hygiene kits, and socks. They provide referrals and transport help. They provide emotional steadiness in a life that feels unstable. They provide follow-up, which is rare and powerful, because what many people need most is not a lecture. They need consistency. They need someone who does not disappear after one conversation. Nonprofits also help with things the public rarely thinks about: mail access, document replacement, case management, medication support, job readiness, storage solutions, basic communication tools. These services might sound small, but they are keys, because rebuilding requires paperwork, deadlines, and follow-through. And those are hard when your day is shaped by heat and exhaustion. Community networks also create dignity. A volunteer who learns someone's name, a staff member who listens without judgment, a cooling space where a person can breathe for a moment. In an unhoused life, dignity can feel rare. So when it appears, it can change everything. Phoenix also has emerging initiatives that aim to create more stable pathways. Tiny homes, transitional communities, supportive housing models, programs designed to reduce friction between the street and stability. No single model solves the crisis, but multiple models working together can create real impact. And in Phoenix, impact is urgent because climate pressure is relentless. What matters is that people continue showing up. When a community chooses to show up, it sends a message. You are not invisible. You still belong to this city. You still deserve a chance. That message may not fix rent prices, but it can keep someone alive long enough to reach help. And that is not small. That is enormous. Because in a crisis, time matters. One day matters. 1 week matters. One moment of clarity matters. Hope does not always look dramatic. Sometimes hope looks like hydration. Sometimes it looks like a safe chair in a cool room. Sometimes it looks like a caseworker calling back. Sometimes it looks like someone saying, "I remember you." Phoenix shows how powerful small support can be when it is steady.